Okay, everyone, it's Q&A time during the international break. We're going to be working through many of your Celtic-related questions that you've been sending in. What I'm going to do is do half of them on this video. We're then going to do another one next week with some other guys to do the other half. Today I've got the Aussie squad in. Paul, who's kind of Aussie, and Scott, who's certainly Aussie, to go through today's questions. Okay, Paul, how are we feeling? We're gradually getting through the international break. Scotland even won last night as well.
Yeah, good. I was in a meeting this morning because obviously it's the start of my working day and watching the score going on in the sidelines and trying not to jump up and down in the meeting. But yeah, great result for Scotland. A good result away from home. So hopefully they can do the business back home and stay up there.
You strike me as the kind of guy that might follow Scotland quite closely, do you?
I do. Not that I've ever been away with the Tartan Army or anything like that, but I enjoy the Scotland games. My son, it's funny, he was born in Australia, but he's a mad Scotland fan, and big Celtic fan as well. So I think he helps me stay really keen on it, and interested in it. Yeah.
Okay. Scott, good win for the Socceroos last night. What was it, 5-1 over Indonesia?
Yeah, the Dutch-Indonesian side that they've trotted out. They've actually, the plan for Indonesia is going to pay off at some point. It'll be good to have a regional rival, but a couple of really good goals from Jackson Irvine last night. He's probably my favourite Socceroo. Lewis Miller, though, he got on the end of one. So we'll know him from Hibs, of course. He's a real solid, lively type that I think Celtic could do with on occasions, especially after getting bossed around again to Rangers last weekend. I think we need a strong character. I think he's got that sort of character. He's got a bit of mongrel in him. So, very happy with the Socceroos.
A few of the Aussies do, actually. I think Triantis, I don't know if he was playing, but he's got a bit of that about him. And Cammy Devlin at Hearts is just a player who gets booked every game. So I don't know what they're feeding the Socceroos, but they're a feisty old bunch. But I saw there was, I think, 80% of the stadium made up by Indonesia fans for the game in Sydney. I saw that reported. I don't know if that was the case.
It sounded like 80%. I'm not sure it was 80%. They got 35,000 in on a terrible pitch. They're sharing it with Rugby League, Rugby Union, and Sydney FC. It was a disgrace to have an international match on that pitch. But yeah, the Indonesians made sure you knew they were there. So Australian fans need to lift their game on that front, that's for sure.
Paul, who's managing Indonesia now? Do you know?
Pass.
Patrick Kluivert.
Really?
There you go. Not a bad shout. So that's the Dutch element. Anyway, we should say well done to Daizen Maeda, Rio Hatate and Japan for qualifying for the World Cup. They're actually the first team to come through actual qualification. So the fourth team in for the World Cup, joining USA, Canada, Mexico. Neither Rio nor Daizen got on the pitch for Japan yesterday. So that's fine. Yang got the final 5 whole minutes for South Korea. They drew 1-1 with Oman, and they're looking good for qualification too. I'm trying to think what else. I think Denmark beat Portugal 1-0, so I'm assuming Casper would have played and kept a clean sheet there, so that's all good. Okay, just before we move on to today's questions, this video is brought to you in association with NordVPN. For those of you who don't know, VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. It secures your connection, protecting your personal information and online activity, especially when you're on public Wi-Fi. A VPN can also make your phone or laptop appear as if it's in another country, making it great for accessing content while travelling. And if you want to try NordVPN for yourself, our link will get you 74% off NordVPN's 2-year plan plus 3 extra months. There's no risk either with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. And the good news is that we now have an exclusive link due to such high sales from you legends. So it's nordvpn.com/CelticAM. That's nordvpn.com/CelticAM. The link is also in the description. Okay, question number 1. It's from Hego67. With McGregor and Forrest almost finished, do you worry about the lack of academy players coming through? I've always thought it's important to keep a small nucleus of boyhood fans or homegrown players as we regularly turn over foreign talent. I know KT is coming back, but I can't see the next player who will do 10 plus years here. I certainly think Kieran Tierney would be the last kind of major player to come through and be a rip-roaring success. We obviously had like Stephen Welsh and Anthony Ralston and a few others since then, but is it a concern for you, Paul, the fact that when Callum McGregor and James Forrest finish, probably in the next 5 years or so, do we have the next kind of Celtic core there ready to come in?
It's a great question. I think what concerns me more is that we don't keep the academy talent that comes through. So if you look in the last few years, we've had Ben Doak, Vata, Cummins just recently, and even Morrison, younger guys like Morrison that went across.
Kelly as well.
Kelly too, yeah. So I think there's talent still coming through the academy, but we don't seem to be hanging on to them in the way perhaps that we have in the past with Kieran Tierney, for example, who was just a star from the start when he came through. So I don't know whether there's something that we can do to hang on to guys better. I read a report from Doak that said he would have stayed if he had been guaranteed a first team slot or something like that. And clearly there's things that you can't guarantee, but I wonder whether blooding players early gives us an opportunity to hang on to them. Having said that, then in the Goldfish Bowl of Glasgow, if we're losing games or dropping points because we're blooding youngsters, that doesn't go down well either. So I'm not quite sure what the answer is, but I do think that looking at players like Lennon Miller now, or even John McGinn, if we'd gone for John McGinn when he's coming through, I think perhaps what we can do if we can't hang on to that academy talent is look to pluck the best of Scottish talent from Scotland and have them come in and then give us some of that longevity.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to ask, Scott. Like, there's two things here. I guess there's and by the way, there's the UEFA homegrown stuff that probably means we'll have to have some sort of Scottish and Celtic influence there by the UEFA rules, so there always will be something there. But you've got the kind of the Celtic leaning element, players who have come through the academy, know what the club is all about, have grown up in Celtic basically, and then you've got the other thing, which is like the Scottish element, people who bring the Scottish culture to things, and again will know about Celtic just from being Scottish. So they are slightly different things, but I guess they're similar as well in that they bring the understanding of what's expected as a Celtic player. So does it matter to you that we have guys like McGregor and Forrest and Tierney, I guess, in the starting lineup in the squad, or would it be enough to have guys like, you know, Lennon Miller and I guess people like, you know, Greg Taylor and I'm sure there's other examples in recent years would have added
Scott
that
Brown
as well. Yeah, Scott Brown didn't come through Celtic, yeah.
Yeah, I think you got to have the mix of both, right? I mean, I think Celtic can always be attractive to get the Scottish grown talent, but you need that element where you got guys coming through as well. That Barrowfield development will be interesting to see the plans around and development pathway now that that's up and running. Does that narrow the gap between, you know, the kids coming through and access to the first team? I'd like to see at least one academy player on our bench every game. I think that's a way to start bringing them into the dressing room, into what's expected, how things work on match day. And then you're going to have opportunities during the year where we're blowing away a team and go, all right, kid, here's 10, 15, 20 minutes. I think that waiting in the B team and then occasionally getting named on the bench or not at all is probably as detrimental as anything. But we also don't know the conversations behind. We know that young players have been like, well, I'll stay if you guarantee me minutes. If you're 17, 18, you've got to prove yourself as well. So, yeah, I think it's also a bigger Scottish problem too. You're just not seeing enough of these kids staying in Scotland. I think Scotland's a really good proving ground because it is a tough league. It's physical, and young players need that physicality. I think that's something it's a bit off topic, but with Arne Engels, right? He's a fine player. Scotland is going to toughen him up, and that's going to bear fruit once he starts really maturing physically 24, 25, 26. So I think young Celtic players and young Scottish players, they need exposure to first team football and the way they do it, even if they're not getting a game. And I just don't think at the moment that's necessarily happening enough. But I'm not there at Lennoxtown seeing what all goes on as well. But it sounds like it's disconnected there.
Yeah, and I think the club are trying to repair that. Like Darren O'Day's gone into that kind of pathways role, hasn't he? And maybe we'll start seeing the rewards from that. Because I mean, player like from memory, Kieran Tierney, nobody was massively talking about Kieran Tierney prior to him making his breakthrough, and he just took the opportunity. So it might be a case of giving someone like Jude Bonner a real opportunity, and I'd hope we'd see a player like Jude Bonner or someone else starting some games between now and the end of the season once the league is wrapped up. I think like in terms of the question is more about the overall squad and the importance of having, you know, that kind of boyhood fans, homegrown type element. And I think for the squad, you need a bit of everything. So you want a Scottish core. I always want a Scottish core in Celtic. I think that's important. I always want a Celtic core in there as well to an extent, players who have come through the academy, etc. Even if they're like Anthony Ralston and don't necessarily play often, I think having them as part of the squad is important. You then need the stars, the stardust in the team. So, and that, to be honest, makes up maybe 50% of what we do. The players we sign, improve and move them on. They're not Celtic fans. They never will really be Celtic fans, but they play well for us and make us a lot of money. And then I think you need guys who come to the club and are really good players, but also just really understand the club, but aren't necessarily Scottish. So Mikael Lustig's a great example of that. Alistair Johnson is a great example. Cameron Carter-Vickers would be another one. These guys who I don't think are angling for their next move. I mean, I could be wrong. Johnson, Carter-Vickers might eventually move on. I don't know. But my hunch is that those guys will be with us for a number of years. Carter-Vickers is in what is coming up to the end of his 4th season. So I think that you need a bit of everything in there. That's my thought. And I think Celtic will be fine. I'm not massively worried about McGregor and Forrest finishing and then suddenly us having like a whole kind of 4-11 and lacking some sort of Celtic identity. I think it will always be there. Either you have anything else to add there before we move on, because I'm wary this video will be about an hour long.
No, I think you're right. And McCowan brings a bit of that now, doesn't he? He's
yeah, guys like that.
He has that, and if you can keep him, yeah.
Okay, right. Let's talk Kyogo then. Mike Jazz saying thoughts on Kyogo's situation. Big V also saying why did Kyogo leave Celtic to play for Rennes, where he has barely had any game time and hasn't scored a goal? It's bizarre, as he was a much loved Celtic player and the perfect fit for derby games plus Europe. Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one. I think quite simply Kyogo fancied playing in a better league. And the theory was that him playing in a better league would further his chances with Hajime Moriyasu and Japan. Hasn't gone well for him so far though, Scott. So do you think he's regretting leaving?
Oh, absolutely. I think I think his agent has a lot to answer for here, actually, because this seems like it was an odd move to begin with, and it's gotten worse, and I don't see how he gets out of it. So we knew with Jota there, the troubles he was having getting into the team and the off-field problems at Rennes. Kyogo goes into that situation, loses the guy who signed him a week later, and then they sign a guy who doesn't know him and doesn't care to get to know him, it appears. He's played, 92 minutes, and he's been there, coming up to 3 months. It's a disastrous move for him. Some of that is pressure, I think, from the Japanese manager, but it doesn't really work if that's purely it, because Hatate Maeda play for Japan all the time. So it's a really strange move, but he wanted away as well, and I think Celtic just facilitated it. But his agent, he changed agencies too. I think back at the start of the season. So I think it's just taken a bunch of bad advice, gone to a team fighting for relegation at the time he signed anyway, who also seem to be in turmoil. I don't know why you would risk that when you could have been playing in Europe against Bayern Munich and Aston Villa. It's just, I don't know, crazy move for me.
Yeah. I mean, the obvious thing to ask here, Paul, and apologies to anyone here, is, if Kyogo's struggling and maybe fancies a return and he's available for much, well, I guess we didn't really get a fee for him because it was like a weird thing with Jota, but if he's available for, I think, 3.5 million or something like that, would you take him back? I know it's a bit, we say never go back, but we're going back with Jota, we're going back with Kieran Tierney.
It's a good question. I really feel for him. I do. I think he's made a move. I think, like you say, Scott, the international pressure, you can't underestimate that. And particularly not saying that other countries don't take pride in playing for their nation, but there's a particular thing in Japan, I think, and what it means to them there. So I don't know, would I take him back? Like, he's a fantastic player, but the last few months, it seems quite different to Jota. There was no sort of lead up to Jota leaving. It was just, we got this unbelievable offer. It was life-changing money for him, and he goes. But his, if you like, love for Celtic never seemed to dissipate through that, and there wasn't this period of him getting a bit disaffected by how things were going. I kind of feel like towards the end that was the case, maybe with Kyogo, and probably it's time to move on. I think, given even before he came to Celtic, Iniesta's comments about him and how much he loved playing with him and his movement and all these things, I still think if it's not at Rennes, there's a club that's right for Kyogo, and I think Celtic for the last few years has been the club that's been right for him and really enabled him to sort of showcase that, whether it's a club somewhere in the lower level of the English Premiership or a club in Spain, maybe somewhere where that movement can pay better dividends. I think there's a club out there for him that'll be the right club for him, and I hope that he gets that move, and I hope that he gets to really enjoy himself, because seeing him smile when he plays football, it's just one of the joys in football, isn't it? And he's not doing it for Celtic now, but I hope he gets to do that for someone else pretty soon, because he just seems to be a guy that loves playing football and gets a great amount of joy out of it.
Yeah, I think Rennes always seemed like a bit of a strange one, and I'm still pretty sure that, what do they say, like, don't believe in coincidences and stuff, and the fact that we signed Jota from the same club Kyogo goes to, it seemed too much of a coincidence there. So I wonder if it was a case of Kyogo saying, I want to leave, and Celtic saying, well, maybe we can work something out here. Do you fancy Rennes, etc. I wouldn't particularly take him back. I think I absolutely loved Kyogo, but I don't think he was nearly as effective this season. I think Daizen Maida's been much better up front since Kyogo left, which is a strange thing to say. Okay, McLaughlin P, if we lose 4 or 5 first-team starters in the summer and Rodgers hasn't extended his contract by then, how can we rely on him to then rebuild properly if he's not wanting to stay? So he's out of contract, not this summer, but next summer. Paul, what do you reckon?
Firstly, I don't think we'll lose that many this summer. I think we could lose 2 or 3. So potentially Hatate, potentially Kun or Maeda. I'd hate to see Maeda go, but I don't think it will be the sort of 4 or 5. I think we all remember Rodgers' first spell with us, and how in that third year the quality of the football towards the end of his time at the club was really falling away, and whether you would say that that's because he wasn't interested, that there wasn't the competition there that he needed, whatever it is, I don't know what you would say, but what I would say is I think this is something that has to sit with the club. And if you look across the city over the last few years, they've changed manager once a year. A manager's come in, looked to sign his own players, and the change has been the only constant there, and it's really not worked well for them at all. If Brendan Rodgers, or when Brendan Rodgers moves on and they bring another manager in, I think there has to be someone in the club that's kind of overarching what the manager's doing. So the recruitment policy, for example, the style of play that we have, these sort of things is managed by the club, so that we're not looking to have wholesale change. Because if you look at when Ange came in, I was just jotting this down earlier on, in Ange's first year, we signed, among others, Joe Hart, Juranovic, Carter Vickers, Starfelt, Hatate, Abada, Jota, Maeda, and Kyogo. All of, I believe that they're all right. All of whom were first team starters. So that was wholesale change in the Celtic first team, and I think just through his relationships and through good work of the club as well, we got all of them right. And there were maybe 2 or 3 fails that sort of don't fit into that list of names. And you can't afford to have that every time you change manager. You can't afford to have that wholesale change in the team. So that's where, whether it's a technical director or some aspect of the club that's overarching that recruitment policy and how the club plays, that's how I think you get consistency when a manager moves on and a new manager comes in, and you recruit the type of manager that fits into your club's style of play. That's why there's been talk about Mourinho in the past, for example, great manager, but I'm not sure he fits into the Celtic style of football, and therefore you go out and find a manager that does, and an Eddie Howe or someone like that, which obviously clearly we wouldn't get now, but the type of manager that plays the style of football that fits for your club. So I think that's the answer, rather than what we're going to do when Brendan leaves and it'll be wholesale change then.
Because we kind of coped all right, I would say, when Postecoglou left, because generally it was the same squad and Brendan came back in. And I know there was that rough period at the start of the season, but I feel like that was, I don't know, part of that was maybe a kind of hangover from Ange. Part of it was the Rodgers awkwardness that he's spoken about pretty openly. But I think generally speaking, we still won the double last year. We eventually got things right. So I'm not particularly worried about this. I think it's a good point you make, Paul, that like Brendan does tend to struggle further as he goes into jobs, and it's not just at Celtic. Like, you look at virtually every job he's been in, and I think he's a great manager. I know there's a bit of debate about that this week. I do think he's a great manager, but you can't deny that, like at Leicester, things fell away badly after a few years, and in Liverpool it was similar. I'm not sure quite if it was the same at Swansea. So that is on my mind. I think 3 years might be the right amount of time here, and then you potentially move on to something else. I just want to throw out another question. It's from Henrikstang. Now, Henrikstang asked a few things, but the one I want to pick up on is if you had a crystal ball, if Rodgers doesn't extend, which manager or managers would you consider for the job when Brendan leaves? Which I guess is something you guys probably haven't thought about, or have you? Is there anyone kind of obvious out there? I mean, the one I always think is destined for Celtic, and he was linked with his last time, is Kieran McKenna at Ipswich Town. I just think he's got Celtic written all over him if he doesn't go to a kind of bigger English club before then. But I just, Celtic have quite a good track record of getting managers in. I'm well aware Rodgers, by the way, could stay for another 3 or 4 years, so this might be really premature, but that's what we're here to do. You got any thoughts, Scott?
Ange Postecoglou. Could we go back there?
We're just going between Rodgers and Postecoglou for the rest of eternity.
Honestly, I've not thought of this at all. The last managerial change I didn't even contemplate. So that's a no for me. I got no one on at the front of my mind.
Okay. Anyone, Paul?
No name spec. And you kind of need to know who's available when the job
is
comes
the name
up.
less important than the profile and what they are?
Yeah, I would say so. And there's 2 things I would say that, Brendan Rodgers, I don't think it will happen, but he could well stay at Celtic for 10 years. But if you look at managers that have been successful over that kind of period of time, look at, say, an Alex Ferguson, who had probably 3 or 4 different teams in his time with Man United. So he would recycle the team well, and another team would come and challenge. And so it depends whether he wants the challenge of doing that with the team, or whether he wants to go somewhere else and build something. But what you say, you've hit the nail on the head there. It's not the name, it's the profile of manager, it's the style of football. They went across to Japan and plucked a manager out of nowhere as far as we were concerned, and he came in and did great things. So I have faith in the team that they'd find the right manager, but it's got to be that type of profile.
Yeah, they've got a good record. I remember the managers we were linked with when Ange left, and I think, when after the COVID season, Eddie Howe is someone we went after. He's clearly proven to be an excellent manager, and even some of the names, I think, like Areola and Maresca, and a few other guys have tended to go on, and McKenna, I guess, have tended to go on and do really well. So I think Celtic actually have their finger in the pulse here. I know everyone what you're shouting at your screen right now. Why are you discussing Brendan Rodgers' successor? It's the international break. It's a Q&A. This is when we do this kind of thing. Blame, who was it?
Henrik's tongue.
Blame Henrik's tongue for all of that. Okay, Aidan O'Brien, do you think how easy the league was during the first half of the season, combined with how many of our players will care more about the Champions League than the domestic stuff, is the reason things have gone a bit flat? Is the solution more Scottish players who won't overlook the domestic stuff like Tierney, Lennon, Miller, etc.? Now, I don't think you can be too critical of Celtic's domestic form this season. Like, this isn't 2012, 2013 when we're making the last 16 of the Champions League and I think losing 7 league games that season. And that was when Rangers were restarting in the fourth tier. Like, that was a total case of Celtic being only focused in Europe, taking their eye off the ball domestically. I think we went out of the League Cup to St Mirren that year. Now this year Celtic have won 24 of their 30 league matches. We've won the League Cup, we're still in the Scottish Cup. The league has never been in doubt this season, if we're brutally honest. I know we've still got a bit more work to do, but the league has never been in doubt from the first game of the season. So I think that's a real credit to the team. I just think, it's like sometimes how we feel as fans is how the players are going to be feeling, because we're all going through a similar process together. And I don't think you can deny that this part of the season is slightly less exciting than what we witnessed from September to February, when we had 2 games a week for the majority of it, and you had the big Champions League games that really kind of kept our season going. They were the big driver of this season. I think the Champions League campaign, 10 matches, I enjoyed like all of the matches basically. So I just think naturally you do feel like this bit isn't quite as exciting. I guess for the players though, if they're feeling that, they need to shake that, and they need to finish the league or the season strongly and win the treble, and I think they need to win the last derby of the season as well ahead of next season. So what do you think of that initial point, Scott, that potentially, the fact that the league was pretty easy during the first half, and the Champions League stuff being the big driver, that maybe that's why things have gone a bit flat now?
I think it's the sheer amount of football is why we're seeing a flat team. If you look at the sort of probably the top 13 players at Celtic, they've played massive minutes over the course of the year. They get a running start at the start of the year because everyone's fresh, excited, out to be there. Champions League's going not too bad. And then you hit that December grind. That I'm impressed that we didn't drop more points through December and January with the sheer amount of football and that we played. And especially in January, there was a lot of guys starting to get their first run in months. That's when we were all caning Yang, saying he's not a Celtic player, and looking to ship him out. But they started to get minutes, and they started. You saw the improvement in players like that as well. I think it's a freshness thing. I think that they've come off an enormous amount of football, but I think also Scottish football this year has been fun to watch. I don't know if you guys got to see the Dundee Derby on the weekend. The second last team is giving an absolute toweling to the team sitting in fourth currently. There's been Hibs have come up, and they're playing really good football. In parts, there's been an Aberdeen at the start of the year. Scottish football is also improving, so it's not always going to be on our terms, belting teams by 6 every week. So that amount of football against teams that haven't had the workload that we've had, you're going to get these ones we're going to have to grind out a win, maybe a draw, maybe we drop points occasionally. But I don't think it's purely an attitude thing where they're going, oh, it's just Scottish football. I just want to play Champions League. You have to win Scotland to be a chance to play in Champions League. So I don't think the players have that sort of mindset at all. I just think that the 9 players that are left from the Ange era, you look at the full body of work over the last 3-4 years, they've played enormous minutes over that amount of time too. At some point, their play is going to drop off a little bit too, I think, both on a physical level and a mental level.
Like, so as fans, do we expect too much? Is Scottish football like belittled to the extent where we all know Celtic are so far clear of everyone that we just expect Celtic to batter these teams every single week? Because, as I repeat, 24 wins from 30, pretty good considering that the vast majority of the drop points have been over the past couple of months. But I can't shake the feeling, like, Paul, I'll be honest, a lot, and this is terrible me saying this doing a channel, but a lot of the Scottish football games, I always enjoy watching Celtic play, but I struggle to get that real buzz for a lot of the games in the Premiership. It's the European Champions League stuff that keeps you up at night and gets you excited. So maybe it's natural the players feel like that. If they do, I mean, Scott, I take Scott's point. This isn't going to get any better going forward, though, is it? Because the gap, you think, well, the money we're getting is only going to get greater between ourselves and certainly the rest of teams out with Glasgow.
It's a challenge. Look at this year compared to last year. So last year, at this point of the season, we had to win every game. So there were no games that we could go into and afford to drop points. You think of when we sort of turned things around there, took the lead, and then we ended up winning the league by a decent margin. But this season's completely different. That we've been ahead and so far ahead now for months. The players are only human, and it's really hard to have, I would say, to have that same level of intensity when you know that the consequences of losing a game aren't the same. You add to that the workload, Scott, as you're talking about, that the players have had, and also the fact that I think you talk to any of the players, they would say they prefer to play twice a week. So they prefer that intensity of play, rest, rather than having a week to prepare, possibly to overthink. So I think that change from playing twice a week to playing once a week, the lack of consequence of a defeat, even last week, there's always a consequence to losing a Celtic Rangers game. But the reality is we're still miles ahead in the league. So I think all these factors play into the kind of slight drop-off that we've seen over the last few weeks. And I think over the rest of the season, they've got to get over the line and get it done. I guess the Rangers game and the Cup semi-final and Cup final become the priorities, don't they? The bigger games. I hope it doesn't get worse over the next few years. I hope that we see teams like Aberdeen were at the start of this season and teams like Hibs are just now in terms of the form that they're on. Even if Rangers resurge to some extent and put up more of a challenge, that's why we like football. Do we want to just rock up and see no challenge any week? You think to a few years ago, the Ronnie Dyla era, or even other areas where we've just had no competition at home and you're useless in Europe because you turn up and you don't have a clue how to play against a good team or a team that gives you a challenge. So I think we want to see a domestic challenge. We want games to be consequential and to have anxiety. My son turns around to me during games, and every game he says, "You nervous, Dad?" And during a Rangers game, you can see I'm twitching, and Champions League games, but some of those games were 3 and 4 ahead. Oh no, I'm not nervous, son, and you want to have that tension during a game of football. So I hope that we don't see things get worse over the next few years.
I just mean like the growing the extent of the European stuff, and it's 10 games potentially. We've got 10 guaranteed European games next season with the one round of qualifying. If we go further, obviously, in Champions League or maybe the Europa League, then we'll have more than that. Like, it's taken up a lot more of the season, and I just feel as that grows in influence, and it's only going to get greater as well with UEFA getting their way. I just wonder if like Scottish football does start to become, it's never going to be an afterthought, but it starts to become less important, and it's a kind of interesting thing to keep an eye on over the coming years. Okay, final question. Callum's Tune saying, why is there such a massive divide within the Celtic support? I'm relatively young at 18, So I've been extremely lucky to have Celtic pretty much dominate everything in my lifetime. But I don't know, recently I'm growing quite sick of some of our supporters who are so critical and down about everything Celtic. Stevie, I don't know, it's just a feeling I've had recently. Has it always been like this, or is it a new thing, this toxicity? This is such a complex issue that I'm confronted with it quite often, probably more so than other people, because I see, well, first of all, when I'm doing a video, I need to pitch how I feel. And generally, I'm honest about how I feel. I try and be honest. I don't say certain things for any reason other than it's how I feel. But you do see a lot of comments coming in, and it gives you a feeling. And even after the game on Sunday, guys, it's a lot. I'd say maybe 60% people incredibly critical, some to the extent where they're worried about Rangers winning the league next year and all of that, fair enough. And then you've got another 40% who just say, oh, we're 13 points clear, we're about to win the treble, give them this game, Rangers are crap, etc. And I guess the truth is somewhere in the middle, as it often is, but how do you even get to the bottom of the fact this is the most dominant period of Celtic domestic dominance ever? And yet half the time it feels like there's real negativity around the club. Like it's a bizarre one. I've got a few thoughts on it, but I'll open it up to either of you if you have any thoughts.
I think it's this question sort of harks a bit to the and I bristle whenever I hear anyone accuses of this, but the Celtic fan entitlement. I think it speaks a little to that, perhaps. I don't think we're entitled, but I think our expectations are higher because the performances of our team over extended period of time are higher than anyone else. So we expect to see better. So when that falls short, I think we can be a bit hypercritical. Some criticism is good. Like, it's never going to be perfect. There's things that we're going to observe in games that we can pick apart and whatnot. And it's always worse after a derby loss, because who likes losing to them? Especially with some of the other stuff that went on Sunday outside the ground as well. So, I mean, that's just part of sports in this modern age too. I mean, everyone's got a stage where they can voice their comments and that. I don't think the support is as divided as it may appear. I'm kind of like you. I think it's somewhere in between of everything. But yeah, I mean, everyone's got a voice now, so you're able to project how you feel. And I'm still filthy 5 days later about what happened Sunday night. I think I've got 2 more weeks of being a miserable bastard, and then we'll do away with hearts and everything will be rosy again, and that's just how it is now.
Yeah, I think social media plays a big part in this, because 20, 30 years ago, longer than I care to remember, when I was the age of the guy that's asked the question, you had 2 or 3 mates that you would talk to about the game after the game, and you would voice your opinion amongst each other, and you might have a bit of a debate or an argument, but it didn't seem like the world was divided because there's only 2 or 3 of you there talking about it. Now you can go on any social media channel you want and see 1,000 comments coming from different areas. And to pick up on something you said, Hamish, you were saying there's opinion here and opinion there, and the truth's maybe somewhere in the middle. That's really the key of this, isn't it? That there is no truth when it comes to our Celtic fans happy or not happy. There's only opinion, and people are different. People's opinions vary, and they're always going to vary. It's just now that, as you say, Scott, everyone's got a platform to voice that opinion, and you're hearing thousands of opinions now rather than just those few that would be around you. The point about the sense of entitlement is a good one, and I think it comes from supporting a club where we expect them to win. And had you supported this club in the 90s, appreciate it, before the fellow was born, but you don't necessarily have that same expectation to win every game. And going and watching Tommy Burns' teams batter Rangers and get beat was heartbreaking, but you have a different expectation going into a game and a different feeling around the game. So the last 10 years hasn't helped us at all in terms of our understanding of of what to expect from going to watch a match in any sport, and that sometimes we're going to lose, and we need to learn to lose well as we need to learn to win well in terms of how we feel about it. That's something we try and teach kids, isn't it? Be a good winner, be a good loser, be a consistent person, if you like, through that. And not that I'm saying I want to see Celtic lose a lot, but we've just become used to seeing them win, expect to see them win, and we don't handle them lose well.
I mean, that's the point I was roughly the point I was going to make. The fact that we're at the top now domestically. Obviously, European stuff's a bit different. We're not at the top of European stuff, but Scottish-wise, we're at the top. We've been at the top for the vast majority of the past decade, and there's really only down you can go from there. And I always think when you're at the top and you're looking behind you, there's always the fear. I think there's a real fear of the day when Celtic aren't winning trebles every season. And like the reality is that's going to come. Celtic aren't going to keep winning trebles for the rest of our history. We're probably going to go through dark days in the future, but hopefully far more of the good days. But like the expectancy this year, every season now, bare minimum Celtic win a treble. Bare minimum, virtually every week Celtic play good football and do something in Europe as well. And to be fair to the team, they've kind of managed that this season. Obviously, there's still work to be done with the treble, and that's going to be difficult. Other stuff as well. It's not always been great watching the team, as we've covered in this video, but I think generally the team have done it. But I just always think there's a worry when you're at the top of being caught, and you're kind of looking for fault in things maybe rather than enjoying it. The point I'd make to back that up, for me, the most enjoyable and kind of engrossing season we've had following Celtic, certainly for me over the past decade, was Ange's first season. And that was the season where the only goal really was to get back to number one. After the COVID season, we were second. We were the one chasing Rangers for the vast majority of that season. And yeah, there was some negativity at the start of the season when we had that really bad start away from home with the 3 games we lost. But generally that season, it felt like everyone was connected more than ever. And part of that is obviously Ange, because that's the kind of figure he is wherever he goes. But it felt as if we were all trying to achieve something and get back to number one. It just felt as if, as I say, everyone was connected. And I just think at times now, maybe winning becomes boring as well, which is a ridiculous thing to say, because it should never become boring. We should never take Celtic winning trophies and winning trebles for granted, because every single trophy Celtic win is real hard work. I don't care what anyone says, but maybe there is an element of maybe winning trebles has become boring. I don't know. And maybe people want something different. And European stuff, that's where we get the something different. But yeah, we've tried to give some thoughts there, but it's such a complex issue. It's a great question though, Callum's tunes, and I'd love to spend more time going into it, because we are living through an incredible Celtic period that in decades to come we'll look back at and go, wasn't that just unbelievable? We won, I think is this the 6th treble if we manage it this year in a decade, and we've had or 9 years, and we've had a couple of doubles in there as well. Like it's absolutely ridiculous stuff. Okay. Yeah. Apologies if your question didn't get read out. Check out next week's video, because there's a number of other ones. We've got one on Adamida, stuff on the tide turning next season. There we go. Someone's worried about the league not being in the bag. We might touch on that, and various other things as well. Glasgow derbies, Lennon Miller. So we'll touch on that on the next video next week. But for now, guys, thanks very much. Appreciate you joining me and sharing some thoughts today. I hope you've enjoyed this video, everyone. No video over the weekend, Saturday or Sunday, but I will return on Monday.